let's see if we can look at a text that Bart refers to that we might find troubling, because there are some problems in Scripture. Let's take the centurion standing at the foot of the cross, who, according to Matthew and Mark, says, surely this is the Son of God, and according to Luke says, surely this is a righteous man. Okay, which is it? Well, you know, one artful dodge, Bart would call it an artful dodge, is to say, well, he said both. It's just Luke recorded one and Matthew and Mark recorded the other. The problem is, of course, that in all three of those synoptic gospels, he only says one thing. There's only a one-liner. Here's how I would approach this. First of all, I'm not going to ask a 20th century question. I'm going to ask a first century question, which is, what degree of freedom did first century biographers and historians have to edit their material in ways that they thought would be meaningful for their audiences? And my answer to that is, if you study other ancient works of historiography and ancient biographies, they had a certain amount of freedom. Now, what I would say is that the centurion probably said something like, surely this was a son of God. Now, what did he mean by that? What he would have meant was that this man is not railing against the people who have put him on the cross. He's not cursing God. He must be a noble person. This must be a death that's a noble death. I mean, we're not thinking that the Roman centurion was converted just by watching Jesus bleed. You know, how would a Roman pagan have viewed this? Surely this is a son of the gods. This man must not have deserved to die. I would take it that that's, in its original historical context, that's what the centurion would have meant. Now, when it's put into a gospel like Matthew and Mark, obviously they have an agenda to say this is the Son of God. This is the Son of God. And so they use that, which really happened, in a more theologically loaded way. I don't have any problems with that. Well, what is going on with Luke where he says, surely this is a righteous man? Well, I would go back to the historical moment itself. What surely this is a son of the gods would mean is, surely this is a righteous person who didn't deserve to die. So what has Luke done? He has interpreted the meaning of the original historical moment for a Gentile God-fearer like Theophilus, so he would understand the significance of the moment. So the issue is not, is this a verbatim or is this a verbatim? The issue is this a true interpretation of the historical moment? And my answer is, yes, they both are. Matthew and Mark are more literally a historical rendering of what was probably said on the occasion. Luke has interpreted the meaning of it, so it makes sense to a Greco-Roman person. There's not a contradiction here because they're actually doing two different things. One is more of a soundbite. The other is more of a theological interpretation of the significance of what was said. We have a lot of that going on in the Gospels. And you know, okay, that makes maybe a modern conservative post-Enlightenment Christian uncomfortable. But my word is, it's in there. Deal with it. This is what God wanted us to have in the Gospels. It's in there. You know, in Mark, we hear about the disciples saying, you know, being called by Jesus, why do you have no faith? But in Matthew, it's always, oh, ye of little faith. Same stories. Okay, is the appropriate question to ask about this, which one is right? No. The important question to ask is, why are they presenting the stories these ways? For what theological and ethical purposes that conform to the conventions of ancient historiography and ancient biography? That's the right question to ask, not the modern question of why do these look different, you know, because that's an anachronistic question. It's an unfair question to ask when none of these Gospels were trying to give us a verbatim of all of this material. They didn't have tape recorders.